many people have spoken about. Jeremy Narby,
sure, yeah.
Who says that the serpent is DNA that we see.
Yeah,
we're in an altered state of consciousness.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and other people.
Yeah.
And when you get into this altered state of consciousness, what do you see? Snakes.
Mm. Yeah.
Everywhere you go, it's an archetype inside a man.
Mm.
You know, the Jungian concept of an archetype, it's an original symbol that we see. But why is that? Why do we see an animal? And I believe that it's because in man, like when he sees a face in the cloud, he fills in the gaps and creates the face himself. Mm. And I believe that when he goes into these altered states of consciousness, he is either A, seeing the double entwined cores of the caduceus, the DNA, or he is seeing the most base form of life there is, the wave. Because without the wave, there is no life. Mm. You know, everything has to have a wave to have life. If not, even stones resonate. So I believe it's the waveform. I don't know if it's the DNA, because that's not what I saw, and that's not what other people have seen, although I certainly saw double entwined serpents. You know, so there you go. It's an internal thing, it's an external thing, it's been utilized for navigation for thousands of years. Yeah. Why shouldn't it be the most worshipped concept on the planet?
Yeah, sure.
And then Christianity came along and demonized it like there's no tomorrow.
This is an interesting aspect of it, because, I mean, as you say, many people, and at least not the Bible itself, of course, connects the serpent with evil. And I mean, do you think that this is, you know, the story is rather strange to me, because, I mean, in that sense, I don't think that giving knowledge to the human beings is a bad thing. I mean, how what's that all about?
It's a good job you didn't say that a couple of hundred years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, even in the late 19th century, Eliphas Levi was put in prison for twice for saying things like that. Okay. So, you know, you're a lucky man. You're living in the time that you are.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
You know, when man has power, one thing he doesn't want to do is give it away. And a lot of the time, that power is gained by knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah.
We gain knowledge, we gain power, and sometimes a little knowledge is too powerful. Is too dangerous in some people's hands, like George Bush, for instance. The Catholic Church was building itself upon one particular deity. It was very much recreating what Akhenaten had tried to do in Egypt and make a one deity religion, if you like, monotheistic religion. Whatever you want to believe about Egypt, because I actually think it was already monotheistic, and that all the gods were different attributes of the deity. But that's another story. Christianity was building itself upon this rock, and if I were to advise the Catholic Church at that time, or the Christian creed at that time, I would say we have this issue all over the place, that all these pagans, if that's the word to use, because it's the only word we've got really, all these pagans all over the place are all worshipping these different things that we don't understand, or whatever. How are we going to overcome this fact? Well, the first thing that we do is we swallow up an awful lot of these concepts that these pagans have got. Hence, you know, most of the saints that are all over the place were actually local deities, like Bridget and St. Bridget. They're already local deities. We just simply Christianise them. That's what you'd do as a marketing man. You'd simply put the new face on the coinage, if you like.
Yeah, sure.
The other thing that I would say to do would be to demonise their most holy God. And I don't really need to have to sprout evidence for that, because the evidence is everywhere.
Yeah, sure.
That they did, that's exactly what they did. That St. Patrick was there to eliminate the serpents. Even St. Paul went to Malta, and a place of incredible serpent worship, and eradicated the serpents from there too. He had a great battle with them, apparently, in two places, all at the same time. But there you go. Propaganda is never always clean. And that's what they did. You know, propaganda's not new.
Yeah.
Marketing men aren't new.
No,
that we're clever, but
exactly,
we're not. It's been done for an awful long time. We're learning from people who did it before us.
So I mean, if we are to go into the aspect of we see today, we can see on throughout certain cities, we can see the basilisk and some in Basel in Switzerland, in London they have the dragon holding the red shield and so forth.
Yeah.
We even have in Christian theology as you say, the Moses carrying the staff of Asclepius, I think it's pronounced.
Asclepius, yeah.
Yeah, Asclepius,
yeah.
and I think there seems to be at least a kind of a fighting, or how should I say that, fighting between the use of the caduceus and the Asclepius. Have you picked up on that at all?
Yeah, there are two elements. I mean, the caduceus, we think that the caduceus came from Eastern traditions. The thing known as the Kundalini.
Yeah.
You heard of that?
Sure.
It's the New Age fraternity speak a lot about it.
Yeah. Sure.
And claim antiquity for it. It is fairly old, but not in the way that people talk about it today. They need to go back to some original texts to get that. But the Kundalini, is this raising and lowering of the entwined serpents known as the Pingala and Ida channels up and down the spine.
Yeah.
In order to get this illumination in the mind and to achieve the head chakra. Mercury, the caduceus, these probably originate in that because the Romans spread themselves very widely.
Yeah.
And just like Christianity, which is a Roman religion, surprisingly enough, and we tend to forget that, adapted these things into their own creeds. Roman religion widened as Rome spread, and so did the Christian church. But you make an extremely good point. The serpent is everywhere. It's in the thrisis bowl, which is a single serpent which entwines the spine, or a rod. It's in the rod of Aesculapius, the great healer, whose own daughter was known as, who was in charge of medical and healing and all these other things, and always linked to healing, whether spiritually within the mind or whether within the physical substance that the snake actually had, gave us the venom, which scientifically has been proven to boost the immune system incredibly, and therefore gives people extended life when there's a lot of disease. So it's everywhere, and what people find incredible, when I, for instance, recently recording a documentary, and we were talking about serpents, and I said, just pick any church you want, I don't care. And we were driving around, obviously there's a lot of churches in Europe.
Sure.
Just drive around, just pick any church you want, I'll find it. And we stopped off at a church, and there was 32 snakes. And when I went to the Vatican, every single pillar inside St. Peter's is topped by a serpent. If this is the place of serpent prophecy, they're certainly making a statement in stone.
Yeah.
And at the root of a great many Freemasonic stories and Freemasonic levels of degrees, the serpent is there.
Yeah.
Just go and have a look. The serpent is at the root of a great many esoteric cults, creeds, and societies. And it's certainly at the root of the Christian church. And I think it was built upon the earlier serpent worshipping cults. The early Christians were known as Ophites, for crying out loud, That Ophite means serpent worshippers. The first Eucharist spoken of is called the cup of the Agatha demon. And it's a serpent. And they would take their Eucharist bread and the wine, and they would place a snake upon the Eucharist table, and it would have to kiss the bread and lick at the wine in order to sanctify. What does that tell us? This is a Eucharist ritual that occurs on a Sunday in almost every church on the globe. And it was originally based upon the power of the serpent.
Yeah.
It's an incredible symbol that has been hard done to. It's been vilified, victimized, demonized, and it's about time that we realize that it is the root of our sacred past. This is our real religious history, that out of propaganda and power-mongering, the Catholic Church eroded.
Very interesting. Can we or rather, do you tie this together with a I don't know if we want to call it an extraterrestrial race or whatever, but in regard, okay, yeah, sure. I mean, in regards to the Shining Ones, I mean, do you connect this with the Serpent cult in that sense, and there were nothing more than human, or how do you connect these?
How do I connect? I'm not David Icke, and I don't believe that the people in power on this planet turn themselves into reptiles at weekends.
Okay, yeah, sure.
That's not something that I believe, and I actually think that's to me personally, saying that you're going to free somebody's mind and that it's time that people took responsibility for themselves and discovered their true selves, and then telling them a lie. I find that terrible. Prove it that these people turn into reptiles. There's just no evidence for it. So no, I don't go along with that.
Okay, yeah.
I am not a disbeliever in aliens. I think that without doubt there are aliens in this universe. Whether they have come to this planet, I am open and honest and say I neither believe it nor disbelieve it. I don't see evidence for it or against it. And I would find it fascinating and would love it. And if there are any aliens listening, please get in contact with me.
Sure,
I would love to talk to you.
Me too, yeah.
All I see in the evidence for the Sumerian Shining Ones, the original Enlil, Enki, all this other bunch, the Gilgamesh epic, and all the stuff that we're talking about here, all I see there are men. They are spoken of as men. They're not spoken of as being other beings, but they're spoken of as being men who came down. The interpretation of coming down is where I feel a lot of it goes awry. What do they mean by coming down? They had their watches, their egregores, their giants, as the Greeks termed them, and they said that they were monstrous. Well, just call it. George Bush is monstrous, but he's not a serpent, and he's not an alien, as far as I'm aware.
Exactly.
I mean, I've even heard people say, well, this is why the Queen wears long skirts, because her tail sticks out the back. Sorry, but I've seen the Queen with a short skirt, and I've actually seen footage of her with a bikini when she was younger. So she had no tail then, unless they very cleverly doctored it out. So I don't go along with that, I'm afraid, but I do say this. The original Shining Ones were also known as Serpent priests, or Serpent doctors. Two of the things that we've been talking about here, that the Serpent can heal us, and that the Serpent is to be worshipped, in that respect that it's an archetype within each one of us. I don't need to explain it away with an alien when it's within the mind of man, when it's within his own temple, his own mind.
Sure.
It's a peculiar and fascinating thing, is the mind, and we only scratch the surface when we're conscious. Like the universe, for instance. What we see is, 4% of the universe? 96% or so is dark matter. We have no consciousness of that because we don't know what it is. Some of it may be neutrinos, we don't know. It's exotic, as they call it. Well, the mind is exactly the same. It is mirrored. Science is now showing that the mind mirrors the universe, just as our ancestors told us, as above, so below.
Yeah, sure. Our
mind mirrors that. We're only conscious of a very small percentage. The rest of it is dark matter. It's unconscious. When we can tap into that point, then we open up an entire new world, and we have to be incredibly careful, because hypnosis, the hypnagogic, all these other points are full of the imagination that man has too, based upon his past, his upbringing, and maybe even his genetic memory. But in addition to that, maybe even also the fact that he can, this sounds strange, but it's provable, that he can contact other things through quantum entanglement.
Yeah, sure.
At a certain point of relaxation within his mind, at a certain